morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's great to see you all again, and I'm excited about today's topic, the human value proposition. Someone asked me before the service, what's that title about? What's that mean? In business, when you have an idea that you'd like to develop into a business, it's called a value proposition. You put together a plan that brings that into manifestation. And so this is my attempt to offer you an idea that you'll find fairly familiar. Some of you are already living this idea, but it's a value proposition about humans, about how we move into a place where we can celebrate and live into the uniqueness of each individual rather than working on or living out of where a lot of us are right now, which is in crisis mode. I believe we're in a crisis today, a crisis of value. We have the problem of people first finding difference in someone else and then devaluing that person. And we see it throughout the world in all sorts of forms. And I'm here to talk about how do we get out of this bind that we've created for ourselves? How do we move out of that into a place of celebrating difference and recognizing the inherent value of every human being? So what I'd like to start with is the value proposition that Jesus gave us, which is, might help if I turn this on, love your neighbor as yourself. We all know that. We've all heard it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. But living it is a different animal. What I'd like to do is I'd like to show you a series of pictures to start with. And while you're seeing the pictures, I'd like for you to examine yourself and how you're feeling as far as the value of that person that you see the picture of. And I'm going to go to the back so that I'm not distracting you, and then I'll come forward again. So just check in with yourself at each picture and say, do I feel the same value for this person that I felt for the last person? And all these pictures, by the way, are on a website called Unsplash, which has phenomenal free photography. So we often find value in infants because of their potential and their innocence. But do we keep that same value no matter the color of their skin? How about when that infant grows up, becomes a man? Do we value them the same? What if they have light skin and they're well educated? Do we value them more? How about when we grow old? Do we lose value as we age? What if we have a disability? What if there's some limitation? What if we show emotion? Do we have the same value when we're upset or angry or frustrated? What if we're from another culture? We look different. We dress different. We have different life ways. What if we look weird compared to how we look in the United States? We follow a different path and express our connection to Source in a different way. We all take on labels. So let's talk a little bit about how we find value in each other. And my proposition is that every way that we've decided to find value in each other has a limitation except for one, and we'll get to that one at the end. So let's first talk about biological value. We share DNA. I don't share DNA with anyone in this room. So maybe I have more value for, say, my daughters who share my DNA, or my parents or my siblings. Oftentimes, the most basic way that we find value in someone else is if they're family, if they share DNA. We call it blood relations, right? Do you find more value in the people that you share DNA with than the people that you don't share DNA with? Or have you transcended that? It's a critical way that over the millennia we have survived. It's in our inherent way of living that at one point in time, the people that we shared DNA with were the most important people in our lives. When we're infants, our caregivers, generally people that we share DNA with, were a matter of life and death for us, for every one of us. If we didn't have those people caring for us, then we risked not surviving. And so it's deeply embedded in who we are that if we share DNA with somebody, then they're valuable to us. But it's insufficient because the close proximity of sharing DNA means that there's billions of people that don't have that same value. But it's basic survival, and we've got to transcend that to get to a place where we can create the world that everyone has value. So biological value isn't enough. It doesn't get us to where we recognize that every human being has value. So let's move it a little bit wider. Another way that historically humans have found value in each other is by being in a clan or a band of certain people. The people that we share social proximity with. You could call this kind of a clan or a band, right? We share social proximity. And what happens when you share social proximity, your brain starts anticipating how people are going to act. We know individually what each other's tendencies are in how we act. You know, who's always got a smile on their face, who's a hugger, who's not a hugger. All of those things we learn over time by sharing social proximity, which then gives us a sense of safety. So you guys are safe because I know what you're going to do and what you're most likely not going to do. And so again, we go back to human value based on survival. Not today, but in the not too distant past, we were in a place in our society as humans where if you were isolated from your group of people, your ability to survive was reduced. Think, getting lost in the Arctic if you were an Inuit. You were no longer around people that could share resources and that could keep you warm and all of that. You risked death if you didn't find value in your band of people. But again, we can't be in the same band. We can't have 8 or 9 billion people all feeling like they're in the same band of people and counting on each other. So it's insufficient. It's an insufficient way to find value in other people because there'll be somebody on the outside. So how about nationality? Nationality is actually a fairly new concept, even though, we've all been embedded in it for all of our lives. But, there's been a lot of human development that wasn't about nationality. It was about the clan and the group of people that you lived with. We find value in our membership in a nationality. Let me give you an example. The recent bombings in Sri Lanka. Every time I hear a news story in the United States about a bombing in another part of the world, the first comment is what happened, and the second comment is whether or not Americans were affected. Sri Lanka, there were hundreds of people that died, and we focused down onto, were there Americans? What were they doing there? Was it targeting us, et cetera, et cetera. We get that sense of tribalism, of whether, we're somehow affected. And if it's a bomb that didn't affect any Americans, then we feel a little bit better about feeling safe in the world. It shouldn't matter. That's incomplete value of other human beings by saying only if they're Americans do they have more value. It's still a human being that was killed, or in many cases, several human beings that were killed. So the idea that we have value because we're American is also pretty limited as well, because even with this grand experiment that we started over 200 years ago, when this grand experiment started, I had value. You guys didn't have value. You didn't have value. Nobody but European males had value. In America, when we started this experiment, the founders of our country limited the value to white European males.
They had to be landowners too.
And landowners, right? People of some sort of means, right? So only until the late 1800s did we add in males of a different skin color. And only until, another 40 or 50 years after that did we add in women. Right? Women weren't even allowed to vote until the 1900s.
1920.
Yeah. So we had limited value, except for, somebody like me who by accident of birth hit the lottery, right? And we have expanded that more and more. And we see it today most glaringly in our current debate about immigration. Who's American, who's not American, how do you qualify to be American, what way do you get here? All of that is about value, about how we value other human beings. And I agree that we can't be the breadbasket and the resource for everybody on the planet, but we can do a better job of attributing value to everybody on the planet. So nationality is another incomplete way of finding value in other human beings, because there's always somebody in and there's always somebody out. So, common interests. This is another way that we find value in each other. If you share my interest in spirituality, then you're more valuable than somebody who just wants to make a lot of money. I got to look at that. I need to find the same value in every human, no matter if they share my interest or not. What we end up doing, common interest is okay, because what you're doing is you're collecting yourself with other people who have the same thing you'd like to focus on, but the trick comes in adding judgment to the people who don't have that interest. And that's where we get into all of the fighting and the warring around common interests. It's okay to have common interests, but when we add judgment to it, we get into trouble. So common interest doesn't give us the inclusion that we want, that everybody has value. So this one might need a couple of minutes to explain, because most of us know how this feels, but you may not have a label for it. We value each other based on utility, on what the person does for us, how they sometimes can benefit us. The best example of this is working. You're a valuable employee if you're doing what you made a social contract to do in your job, right? That your employer finds you valuable. If you stop doing it or you are no longer able to do it, then your value decreases. So this happens in the workforce, but this also happens in families. This is a tough one because we like to care for each other. But we can get into the place where there's only value if you're doing something for somebody else. And the old saying, what have you done for me lately, is a great example of that quid pro quo. I find value in you if you cook me a great dinner, or you take out the trash, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Utility. You only find value in people that make your life more quality. increase the quality of your life. So utility is a tricky one to watch for because it happens, but it also means that if somebody doesn't have something to offer us, then they don't have value. And that's incomplete. Because there are people on this planet who don't have the functioning to be able to offer things to other people, and they still have inherent value. So let's talk a little bit about inherent value. What I'm talking about is that concept that every person ever created in whatever form is an expression of source energy. Every one of you is a unique expression that comes directly from source. It doesn't matter what you've done, doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter what color your skin is, it doesn't matter what your level of functioning is. You are an expression of source. Therefore, you have value. That's what I'm talking about inherent value. And my proposition is until we live that, we're going to continue to have the problems we have with difference with other people. Understanding that it doesn't matter what you look like, what you act like, what you've done, what you've not done, you have inherent value. So one of my favorite quotations from the New Testament is, "Be in the world but not of the world." Our current culture sees difference. Our current culture instills fear when we see difference. Our current culture spreads hatred. And our current culture wages war. When we see inherent value in every human being, we are called to see commonality. To see that, sure, we've got some surface differences, but in essence, we come from the same source. We are called to instill value. Whether the person that we're in front of or not sees it in themselves, our job is to find value in them, to recognize that they are an expression of the divine. Our job is to spread compassion by seeing that everybody is divine and doing the best they can to live their life with joy. And our job is to wage peace, to actually put that belief and that knowing that everyone has value into action in our world. This is brought out in one of our favorite prayers. As I was researching this talk, St. Francis of Assisi didn't write this, by the way. It's attributed to him. It first showed up in 1912, so several years after St. Francis's death. And it was attributed to St. Francis of Assisi because it was consistent with his teachings. But it's that same idea of when we see the world doing something, we're called to do the opposite. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. So how do we do this? How do we practice this? Well, we go back to the first slide that we started with. Whoops. Love your neighbor as yourself. Now, most of us grew up hearing this as a commandment, that we're supposed to do this, right? That if we're good people, then we'll follow this statement. I actually think, I studied Greek, as many of you know. I think it wasn't a commandment by Jesus, but it was a statement of universal truth. And the way that I hear this statement is, you can only love your neighbor to the extent that you love yourself. That's a universal truth. And so, since we're talking about value your neighbor as yourself. You can only value yourself, or you can only value your neighbor to the extent that you see your inherent divinity, your inherent divine essence. So let's talk about how we do this. It's, again, one of those things that's simple but not always easy. Step one, recognize your own value. Spend time with your Creator, basking in the beauty of what was created and connecting with your source. And then step two, recognize that same value from our Creator in everyone else that you see. When you first recognize your divine value, then it's real easy to just spread that out and say, I'm from Source, you're from Source, we're both created from Source. So what I'd like to do is put this into practice for a minute in our meditation. And I'll tell you up front what I'll do at the end of our meditation. The end of our meditation will be one last slide. And when we get to that point, I'm going to ask you to open your eyes and see the value in this last picture. So take a moment to get comfortable in your seats. Check in with your body. If there's any place, any part of you that's tense or in pain, make an adjustment in your body or breathe into that area. Breathe down into that part of your body to say, thank you for bringing my attention, my consciousness to this need, and I'm going to supply oxygen to help relieve this pain. I'd invite you to close your eyes or soften your gaze. Take a cleansing breath, bringing in a good bit of oxygen and then letting it out slowly. Feeling your body settle into a quiet space. And then I'd invite you to let your mind know that it's not needed other than to process the words you're hearing me say. So let your mind quiet down. And I'd invite you to move down into your heart space. Behind your physical heart and in front of your spinal column is an energetic space I like to call the sacred heart. It's your access to Source. And as you find yourself in your sacred heart, feel how warm and nurturing that space is deep within you. And now take a moment and feel source energy in that space with you, sharing that sacred space deep within you, the source of your being, the reason that you were created. Feel the value that your Creator feels for you. All of the wonderful ways that you navigate life. The physical body you were gifted. The emotional energy body you were gifted. The intellectual energy body or your mind that you were gifted. And the spiritual energy body or soul that you were gifted. Allow yourself to open to the love of the universe, pouring over you, pouring in you, pouring through you. Allow yourself to fill up with the love of your Creator. And now filled up with the love of the universe that brought you into being, I'd invite you to gently open your eyes and look at the last slide and see the value. None of us have ever met this man. He lives on the other side of the world. We don't share his life ways. We probably don't share his religion. We certainly don't share his DNA. We aren't a member of the same clan. We don't share nationality. This man is an expression of the divine, just as you are. valuable. Worthy of dignity, freedom, love, respect, just as every creation of our Creator is. Let's go out and change our world, one person at a time.
Seeing and finding that value in every person and creature we encounter.